from the India government who are critical to India's plan on climate change, its policy as well as implementation domestically. Today we are speaking on Talkathon with Mr. Prakash Javadekar, Union Environment Minister, Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and Shri Piyush Goyal ji, Minister for Power, Renewable Energy as well as Coal. The two are important because we are now sitting about 72 hours before the Paris climate change talks start, where the world will, in all hopes, see a global agreement under the UN Convention, which will set us on a path to maintaining global temperatures below 2 degrees centigrade. India plays a critical role at the Paris climate change talks. At the same time, what emerges from these talks will impact India considerably in coming years. To discuss India's role there and what the government sees coming out of Paris, we'll take questions from different people on Twitter who've been tweeting with the handle Ask on COP21. We'll take these questions to the ministers and hope to get detailed replies from them on these questions. You can continue to tweet through the program and we'll try and pick them up one by one. To begin with, thank you, ministers, for having here. I'm sorry to the audience, it took a while because the parliament session is on. The ministers were busy in the parliament, they just quickly ran out for the show with us. Thank you so much for coming on the show with us, sir.
Yes.
Can we start with the questions, or would you like to start initially by suggesting what are the 2 or 3 critical issues for us?
Today I am leaving for Paris with the hope that world will arrive at a good climate agreement, because this is need of the hour. All countries are suffering, and particularly poorer countries and poorer sections of society. They are suffering because of the temperature rise which has happened today, 0.8 degree Celsius, which has happened today, and therefore we must act today. And as you rightly mentioned, our goal has to be to keep temperature rise below 2 degrees by 2100. So, we have already submitted very ambitious, comprehensive INDCs, and on that backdrop, and world appreciated it largely. So, we are going with hope to Paris, and every time many people thought that India opposes. This time we are proposing. We are not opposing, we are proposing what can be the real good alternative. We are proposing what can be the best climate deal. We are proposing as to what can be a just and equitable deal.
If I can take the first question this time, and I think it's slated for both of you. This is from Kanika, who asks, in fact, is India's renewable energy targets over ambitious? I mean, we've heard criticism of them being under ambitious, but here's one saying, are we over ambitious? And if both of you could answer.
This is one government which believes in very challenging tasks ahead of us. We are very confident of the 175,000 megawatts of renewable energy that we've targeted to install by 2022. We have very cogent deliverable plans on the ground, how each of these targets is going to be met. I don't think it's over-ambitious given the backdrop of serious concerns about the environment that Mr. Javadekar just alluded to. It's the need of the hour. It's a need that Prime Minister Modi recognized many years ago while he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, and he promoted solar and wind energy in his state in a very big way. It's on the backdrop of falling prices. And you are aware that we have discovered a price of 4 rupees 63 paisa through a transparent reverse bidding process for every unit of solar energy. And given technological innovations and the economies of scale, we are very confident that solar energy, wind energy, other forms of hydro, biomass power will all become not only viable, but add tremendously to India's energy security and provide low-cost, affordable power for the next 25-30 years.
This, despite, I mean, in contrast, if I see the second question coming up on the screen, it's a complete contrast, and I think both of you would need to answer that. Vivek Sen Gupta suggests that India's INDCs are seen as non-ambitious and over dependent on coal. I guess this
No.
is in context of the international arena.
No, I read this kind of two pieces on the eve of Paris COP. When we presented INDCs on 2nd October, till practically 20th of November, so last 50 days, it was well appreciated. But somehow there are always campaigns before also the Paris. So in a run up to Paris, somebody has said that they are lower on ambition. We have given immediate response to the concerned newspaper and news agency that it is not so. And the report of NGO Alliance, which is not a government effort, has very well clearly said in their fair share report that India has taken up much more than their fair share and developed world has taken much less than their fair share. So that report was not mentioned in that newspaper, but we have responded.
I may just supplement. Just before coming here, I had a meeting with the executive director of the International Energy Agency, Dr. Bilol, and he's on record internationally praising India's aggressive intended nationally determined contributions. He's on record to say India has gone that extra mile to contribute to the world effort to address concerns of climate change. And when you juxtapose our INDCs with both our development imperative and the fact that as we speak, our pollution levels or our contribution to carbon emissions are about 1/10 of what the United States does, probably 1/5 of what Europe does. So we are still one of those countries which does not, on a per capita basis, contribute significantly to the problem that the world is facing.
Even on absolute term, Piyush, even on absolute term, our coal consumption is much, much less than many of the developed countries.
If I can add on to this and just ask a question tagged on this, how do you see this movement that we see in the West about disinvestment in coal? How will India respond to this? Is it a challenge for us?
Not at all. See, we need a base load. In any case, I cannot have renewables without a base load of power. America has shale gas and is able to provide newer plants with shale gas. India does not have natural gas. So we are required to expand our coal-based facilities to meet the aspirations of our people, our development needs, to provide low-cost energy access, affordable access to the poor of India. And therefore, coal will continue to be the mainstay of our power requirements till we get alternates or better technologies which can bridge the gap or bridge the requirements of base load. We are very anxiously and supportive of all international efforts to do research and development in clean coal. We are working actively to look at better alternatives for energy storage. We have 5 projects going on solar thermal, which will help us to see if that can provide 24/7 power to the people. So India is working very extensively on R&D. But as we speak today, there is no technology in the world which can provide affordable energy access to our people. Having said that, even in coal, we are focusing our energies on efficient plants. So we are not allowing the old plants. We are insisting on super efficient, ultra critical plants in the future. We are looking at carbon capture as a major effort, an effort on our R&D activities. So we are very confident that on the one hand, while we need coal to meet our energy needs, we'll ensure that that is also as efficient as can be.
If I could just take this a bit further and then we go on to the next question. If we compare ourselves with other countries developed which are asking for disinvestment in coal, compare ourselves with other emerging economies, where do we stand in some sense of quantum of how much coal we're using, where we would reach in the next few years, if you could elaborate a bit.
India, ironically, is one of the lowest consumers of coal in the world. On a per capita basis, even in the current year, our coal consumption will be about 0.5 metric tons per year per capita. This is the same level that the United States was consuming in the 1870s, nearly 150 years ago. So India today is at what the United States was 150 years ago. The United States until about 10 years ago was consuming nearly 5 tons per capita of coal.
Per year.
They have marginally brought it down in the last decade. But even now, they are at least 6 or 7 times more than India on a per capita basis.
And per capita basis, and even in absolute terms, it translates into triple. In absolute term, ton is a ton is a ton. Then they are 3 tons and we are 1 ton.
And plus the huge oil that they consume. After all, that's also fossil.
Shale gas is
Shale gases.
fossil.
Which brings me again, we're seeing the number of questions that have come. There's a contrast in the way people see our INDCs and where India is presented. So the next one is actually from a former minister and member of parliament from Congress, Shri, who asks one question to which I haven't got a convincing answer. How does Government of India intend to finance the trillions required for their INDCs? Because we mentioned $2.5 trillion, the cost over a decade.
I'll come to that. See, the $2.5 trillion is the total cost of 10 years of our action. And we are today nearly $2.5 trillion economy, which we will grow at least triple as we are growing at least with 7.5% per year, even that will come to that. So, it will be a great boon for our economy. We can mobilize resources because it is not only public investment, it is public as well as private, as well as FDI, as well as many other things put together. So, there is, my friend Shri knows very well that the present round government is ready with 40,000 megawatts of preparation for 40,000 megawatts, and the latest round Piyush will be able to tell you more, but it's a very good response from all concerned industries. So that is one renewable, but more than renewable, other adaptation and other costs. We have factored it that ultimately it was a long exercise of 1 year with 140 government agencies, private agencies, modeling studies and also think tanks, all put together in expertise. We have worked out thoroughly the mathematics. So, it is not just a wish list, it is concretely backed by money power.
Well, Nitin, I am very clear about finance being a critical aspect of all our plans going forward, and which is why even in the course of the Indo-US energy dialogue, I have been flagging off this issue. Mr. Javadekar on many international fora has been talking about the responsibility of the West to provide long tenor, low cost funding to help countries such as India, who are world leaders in renewable energy today. Our plan on renewable energy is the largest in the world going.
In terms of the ramp up,
in terms of the ramp up, 5x in 7 years is unheard of in the history of the world. Having said that, while we are hoping that Paris talks will come up with some serious effort of the world community to provide low cost and long tenor funds. In fact, many funds were committed in the Green Climate Fund, but we haven't yet seen the light of day of that. Simultaneously, we are preparing ourselves to see how we can finance our renewable energy thrust. For example, we hope to very soon launch a $1 billion private equity fund where some of the government companies are seeding the initial capital required, and then we'll look at international capital being pooled with that to provide equity support to companies which want to come in and invest in India, or Indian companies who want to invest in renewable energy. On the debt side, we have significant Indian capital available. We are open to borrowing internationally, and that's where we are looking for long tenor and low cost funds. My own sense after several interactions with both equity markets and the debt markets is that there's a lot of traction for renewable energy funding. And as far as renewable energy funding goes, I don't think there will be a major significant challenge. I do believe the challenges will come in terms of technology, in terms of transmission and greening the corridor, energy corridors. There we have as a nation, and again reflecting the Prime Minister's serious commitment to climate change, quadrupled the coal cess from 50 rupees a ton that prevailed 1.5 years ago. It was made 100 in our first budget, July last year,
And then
200 in our second budget, February this year. And in another 3 or 4 years, we'll be collecting about $4 billion every year in the National Clean Energy Fund, which will be used to address concerns of the environment.
One important fact which comes to notice is people are talking about $100 billion because that is how they will give money to developing world. India is leading from the front on this issue. We have taxed our coal production with 200 rupees per ton, nearly $3.50. It's a big thing. Even if the developed world follows India's example and rate, they will generate from their coal production $100 billion.
Absolutely.
which actually brings me to a question coming out of the answer Minister Piyush Goyal gave. For technologies and for some areas, we'll find investments coming in. But for areas like adaptation, it might be difficult to find money unless there's global funds available. In that case, how important is it for India to get an assurance of some nature at Paris for global climate finance?
We are actually looking more for technology support because ultimately, even if you get money to build resilience, because we have different kinds of states. We have 10 coastal states, 10 Himalayan ecology states, 60 islands where people are inhabited, and 2 are desert states. So with such a variety, our adaptation requirements are also varied, and there to mitigate the adaptation needs as well as building resilience, you need many new technologies, and that technology support at an affordable cost is the most key important aspect of Paris Agreement, because if that comes about, the developing world can take more robust action.
Okay. On that, let me go to the next question, which is from G. Anant Krishnan, who asks, actually going back to climate finance, how much of climate finance has India received so far in real terms? Under what heads?
Well, really, we've not received any significant amounts. The KfW of Germany has given us some lines of credit, about $1 billion €1 billion that were finalized when Chancellor Merkel was in India to meet the Honorable Prime Minister. Exim Bank has given some commitments, but
US $1 billion.
Yeah, unfortunately, Exim Bank's very operations are right now under some kind of suspension. Other than that, we are in dialogue with the Canadians, with Australian companies. Japan is very keen to support our climate efforts in different forms. But if one was to actually look at any sort of funding coming directly for climate financing, I would think it's nothing.
And Nitin, you know very well, $100 billion were to be built by 2020. So anybody will expect that first year, this year it would be $20 billion. But what came as pledges is just $10 billion, and that too was explained afterwards that these $10 billion for next 4 years. So that means $2.5 billion per year. So that's the performance. So world will definitely be discussing that, a very important aspect.
And you think that, I mean, considering how the developed world has acted so far, do you see Paris as a place where there will be resolution, a roadmap of some sort on climate finance?
I think if country like India, which is not cause of the problem of today's climate change, wants to become part of solution because of our positivity and because our leaders, Narendra Modi, is very proactive on this issue, because he says that we are answerable to the future generation. But India alone cannot mitigate the challenge. It is the developed world which is absolutely important, and unless they take action, more robust and ambitious action, more pre-2020 ambitious targets, the scenario won't change.
Could you explain a bit to our readers? A lot of our viewership will not understand what do you mean by the pre-2020 actions?
See, in Kyoto Protocol, the first commitment period was up to 2012. So from 2012 to 2020, the new ambitious targets were to be taken up by the annexed countries. But many countries have not taken those targets. So they are doing some part of the program, but they are not taken the targets. So, what we are saying that in Paris, to build confidence, they should declare their ambitious pre-2020 targets, and in 2018 we can review what has happened to those targets.
Let me go to the next question. Actually, it comes back to India's INDCs and a bit of explaining to do with the terminology involved, which is slightly jargonistic fill for people who are trying to understand it the first time. Is Mohammad Zahir asking both of you, why are the targets given in emission intensity rather than absolute emissions as most countries do? Just to correct, I think it's most developed countries that give absolute emission targets.
No, because there is a rationale to it. The developing world will require to develop. So, their net emissions may go up, but that space is allowed, and therefore, world arrange that the developed countries will reduce their emissions and they will take emission cuts, and we will reduce our emission intensity. कम धुएं में ज़्यादा तरक्की, कम बिजली में ज़्यादा तरक्की, ये उसका उत्तर है. यानी एकदम आसान समझने के लिए मैंने ये दो फ्रेज निकाले.
Nitin, I'll just supplement this to make it easier for the participants in the talkathon. Most of the developed world, and we have all seen it in the last decade or 2 decades, is growing at a very slow pace, 1%, 2%, maybe 3%. And they don't have very aggressive targets of growth going forward. Most of their infrastructure is already developed. They all have jobs, they have manufacturing. Now, because of the high cost of living, they are moving manufacturing. First they moved to China, now they are looking at other shores. And therefore, the economies of the West have outsourced their energy requirements
And
to
emissions.
and the emissions, corresponding emissions, to other parts of the world, and are more and more moving towards service economies or trading economies which import. So, the emission is created at the manufacturing stage. Their emissions are broadly consumer driven. Despite that, a country like America consumes nearly 15,000 units of electricity per year per capita, whereas India is still 1,000 units per capita per year. Now, if you look at the amount of waste that is happening in the Western world, they have tremendous ability to cut down on that wasteful consumption, as well as because they are hardly developing or growing their economies, obviously their carbon intensity is not going to grow. So, as they cut down on inefficiency and hopefully improve their lifestyle, as Prime Minister Modi suggested, so that in the middle of the night, if you wake up in your hotel room and look outside the window, you won't find a 100-story building with every light switched on for the whole night. Hopefully, you will see them becoming more conscious about waste, because even if they are wasting a pizza, let's say, a half-eaten pizza, it was cooked somewhere, it was transported somewhere, it was served somewhere. All of this adding to emissions and global warming.
I mean, Minister Piyush Goyal sir referred to two things, I think, if I can stitch them together before we go to the next question. You refer to lifestyle emissions some way. You also refer to the differential in the way societies are in different countries. That differentiation exists. It's a key issue at the Paris COP. Where do you see differentiation go, the principle of CBDR go at Paris? How do you see it standing up?
I think in Lima, climate call of action, we have mentioned it very clearly, because that was actually the essence which took it one more day to conclude in Lima, and that was about mention of that we are not rewriting the convention, we are taking it forward. It is more enhanced action than Kyoto Protocol, and therefore, the new regime will still be under convention with its principles of CBDR, equity, all elements embedded in it. So, this is the basis which bones out of historical responsibility, because as I said, today we are experiencing climate change. That is because of historical emissions of 150 years, because carbon remains there in atmosphere and causes damage for 150 and more years. So, we are saying that historical responsibility cannot be wished away, cannot be obliterated, and therefore, this differentiation will remain, and that world has agreed.
Going on to the next question, I think looking at more what the Prime Minister suggested will come through at Paris beyond the core agreement is Asna Mehra asking what are the hopes and expectations from the Solar Alliance being proposed? If you could elaborate on what's the scheme of things that we can look forward to.
Sure. Prime Minister Modi believes that there's a lot to do when we work together as a team. He has articulated that on his 15th August address when he spoke about Team India. Similarly, when we look at the world as one, there are about 100 countries between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, which are blessed with very large amounts of sunshine, almost 300 days a year. The irradiance there is quite high. These 102 countries between the two tropics are sought to be brought together under one platform called the International Solar Alliance, which Prime Minister Modi and President Hollande of France will be launching on 30th of November, 3 days from now in Paris. And the purpose behind the alliance is to forge partnerships amongst all these nations which are blessed with great degree of sun, in terms of technology, in terms of hand-holding, in terms of supporting each other's efforts to expand solar energy in our respective countries, in helping each other with finance, helping each other with technology to manage the transmission and evacuation of green energy, balancing the grid, supporting through peaking reserves. All of these put together, the entire ecosystem of solar energy is sought to be developed jointly. R&D efforts in different countries are sought to be shared with other countries. And the idea is that the world becomes one when it comes to supporting each other to expand renewable energy across the world.
If I can try and tease out more from you, I know this is early days, but in this scheme, we are looking at future technology development. Are we suggesting a kind of a shared intellectual property rights regime? Is it looking at existing technologies again?
Well, for the present, the International Solar Alliance will be launched on the 30th. We'll have an international steering committee sitting down and discussing the way forward to see what focus should be done on the present technologies and present infrastructure. How much should we invest on R&D on a shared basis? How that R&D can be available to the rest of the world? All of that will be fleshed out in greater detail by the steering committee. But there is also a great deal of effort across the world, and India is again at the vanguard of that effort to develop newer technologies in several areas, in storage, in solar, in wind, where we are a world leader in manufacturing, in coal technologies, clean coal technologies. In fact, only a couple of days back, we have approved a proposal from MIT in USA. And it was a visit 2 months back where we initiated the dialogue with them. And now we are looking at a formal engagement with MIT to develop clean coal technologies. We are looking at a deeper engagement with Australia on clean coal technologies. On storage, we have 6 pilots, 6 projects working on R&D. Offshore wind is an area on which the Union Cabinet has recently approved a 1,000 megawatt pilot. In wind, we have manufacturers who are supplying to the rest of the world, and now we can go up to 120 meters with turbines as large as 5 megawatt. So India is taking a leadership role when it comes to renewable energy.
Minister, which brings me to your proposal that you'd put on the table that there should be a window in the Green Climate Fund where we can look at technologies to be bought and distributed at a relatively cheaper rate to poor countries.
Yes.
That decision will have to be taken at Paris if GCF should have that window or not. How critical is it for India's interests there?
I think it is not only for India's interest, it is for developing world's interest. And as I'll tell you analogy, to fight HIV/AIDS, world did arrive at an extraordinary solution for an extraordinary circumstance.
You're referring to the compulsory licensing regime on the
Yes,
trips.
and they did it for making available cheaper drugs. I asked the world community, is climate change not as serious as HIV/AIDS? It is much more serious than. And therefore, extraordinary situation requires extraordinary thinking, extraordinary solutions. And one solution is this, where the companies who have done research should not go uncompensated. So, part of GCF can be given to them, and that is how you can make critical technologies, particularly clean coal technology, clean technologies, evacuation of solar power or storage technologies, or carbon capture and use. 2 days ago, our London friend who have now invented carbon capture and
CCS.
use
Oh, use.
immediately.
IIT engineers.
So, to IIT engines. So, what will happen? I can visualize a campus where there is a power plant from which you are capturing carbon and using it in chemical factories and other where carbon is in the same
An
campus.
input.
It is as an input. So, things can develop, and that is what has to happen. And therefore, this finance is a critical component of technology input, and that is the point which India raised and world has accepted, and they are moving on that direction.
I'll just supplement one very serious concern that I think has not yet come in the public domain as much is hydrofluorocarbons which go into air conditioning. Now again, the United States and other Western world already has their air conditioning set up,
Sorted on this.
and they need to now replace that with hydrofluorocarbons. But given their larger amounts of larger sizes of the economy and the ability of their people with $70,000, $60,000 per capita income to replace existing air conditioning systems, for a country like India, the cost of that technology will become very critical. If A, we have to replace existing air conditioning systems, B, the newer systems that are set up in the years to come. And one estimate is that what air conditioning we have in India today would probably expand 4x or 5x in the next 10 or 15
We are
years.
in the most rapid growing in air conditioning
right.
at the moment.
Now, at that stage, we have the ability to leapfrog technology and start by setting up environment-friendly air conditioning and avoiding hydrofluorocarbons. But when I go out in the world looking for that technology, it's so expensive that I cannot ask the people of India to pay for that.
And we are negotiating this right now at the Montreal
But
Protocol.
Montreal Protocol,
Sorry.
Montreal Protocol, we have said very clearly that we are positive. But let us also not forget that the Western world first suggested that do away with CFL, CTL and other gases and bring as an alternative HFC and HCFC. Now everybody is saying HFC is more dangerous. Earlier gases were ozone leaking, depleting. Now these are global warming potential. So now replace this. So this is the second stage reform. So we have given our amendment. That also shows India's positive mindset.
But also the concerns about walking on a chemical treadmill in some sense, of constantly replacing one with more expensive. Let's move to the next question, ministers. Anurag Sharma, who asks, how do we ensure that common citizens also identify themselves with climate change goals and contribute towards it? I guess this is a good question because sometimes we end up at the very esoteric, jargonistic level of this conversation.
That is why India has started one very good experiment. With this time, we have taken our Science Express as Climate Change Express. It is moving around through 70 stations for 7 months, and now as of today more than 3 lakh people have visited it. It's in Saharanpur today, and this train starts with the science of climate change and ends with, in the 8th coach, what I can do to mitigate. So save energy, save water. There are 100 acts which individual can do and take pride that I am a climate friendly citizen. So that, and we are now digitize this whole exhibition, and we are going to distribute it to all school, colleges and everywhere, so that they see it and new awareness is created.
But I think he's flagged off a very good point. It's got my mind working also. Maybe after the Honorable Minister is back from Paris, we can work together to see how we can take this engagement with the people to a much more deeper level, and how we can engage students in schools and colleges, how we can engage with the media to take this message to the people of India, and possibly even make citizens starting to understand how much they are contributing as, let's say, energy efficient citizens, as citizens who are not wasteful, as citizens who come up with newer ideas. 14th of December, for example, is celebrated as Energy Conservation Day. On that day last year, we had participation of 65 lakh school children in a painting competition. And I tell you, some of the paintings these young kids, starting from the age 7 and 8 to 15, came up with were just outstanding paintings. But it also shows their consciousness towards the subject, towards energy efficiency. But I think the suggestion that was given is outstanding. And once we are through with the COP negotiations in Paris, we'll certainly work more actively on this suggestion.
One thing where it's a mix of civil sensitization of civic society as well as the government taking a leap in some sense is the initiative on LED bulbs, before this on the CFLs. And the next question is exactly on that, with Mayank Singh asking you, Mr. Goyal, as AP is moving ahead with LED bulbs, till what time period all street bulbs in our country will be replaced?
I must thank him for this question because it's a pet subject.
Yes, we figured.
Well, just to set the thing in context, because very often when one hears the achievement in context, it's more exciting. In the year 2013-14, India and its government company was able to give out about 600,000 LED bulbs to consumers to use. Prime Minister Modi understood that energy efficiency is the way forward and embarked on a plan on 5th of January 2015 that by 2018, the entire country, every home, every office and every street light, everywhere we will replace with LED lamps. This program is estimated to take about 3.5 years. But in 3.5 years, India will be replacing 770 million domestic bulbs and about 3.5 million street lights across the 5,000 towns of India. And the resultant impact is an avoided peak load capacity of 22,000 megawatt. So we don't need to set up 22,000 megawatt of coal-based plant, because it's all the peak capacity, evening hours. So solar and all can still go on as planned. Coal-based, we can avoid 22,000 megawatt. We'll be saving about 110 billion, which is about 11,000 crore units of electricity every year, translating to a saving to the people of India in their electricity bills of over 40,000 crores every year. Now that's the scale at which we are ramping up. Already we have crossed the mark of 3 crore.
And more importantly, Piyush's ministry and he himself has taken lead in negotiating, bargained, a massive bargain with the producers so that the bulb which was available at 400 rupees has become for 100 rupees. That's the most creditable thing.
In fact, people talk about renewable energy and you refer to also renewable energy prices falling. If more R&D happens in this area, the prices could fall rapidly, perhaps at some point even come down to the prices that we're seeing for coal and other sources at the moment. Which brings me to a question that somebody else has asked, and I'll tag on one of my own on top of that. Is Sabarish asking, will there be emphasis on research on renewables to make them more affordable and efficient? And let me tag mine on to that and hopefully get an answer to that as well. Is the world's not anyway close to looking at a complete renewable energy era? There are people who idly talk that that would be the best scenario that we could reach. How far is the world from there? What would it take, if at all, if you can visualize and say we are there? And in that terms, Minister, specifically for you, at the Paris talks, there are these phrases like decarbonization, reaching climate neutral. So if you can couple these together and answer this.
The first part is technology is a thrust area for this government. We recognize, and we've seen that in, let's say, the computing industry. The cost of computers, the cost of memory, the cost of storage of data has rapidly fallen in the last 2 decades. Similarly, on solar technologies or wind technologies, newer developments and R&D has resulted in prices falling. Storage is one element which is also come down, but still we have a long way to go before we can truly use storage at very large levels of rollout. But I won't be surprised if in the next decade or so, a combination of storage, solar, wind and hydro could become a major part of a country's energy needs. And maybe in about 2 decades or 25 years, one can probably imagine a world which could be fossil free in terms of energy requirements. Having said that, I must also add one small area of research which I see is going to be disruptive and game changing as much as storage, and that is the electric vehicles. In all of this discussion around energy, we are forgetting that electricity is half the story. The bigger half and the more polluting half, for example, New Delhi, the pollution in New Delhi is largely vehicular. Manufacturing or power, all of it put together contributes less than 10%. It's more vehicular pollution. Electric vehicles, if we can in the days to come roll it out much faster, bring in economies of scale, by that time storage gets cheaper, so batteries can be put into the cars which can support long distances. My own sense is that in the next decade or two, the big leap forward in technology is going to be electric vehicles. India is again wanting to be at the forefront of that. We were in dialogue with the Indian companies making electric cars continuously, including as recent as yesterday. And I believe in the next few days they are announcing some game-changing technological innovations from India. And I have the confidence that we will make in India probably the best cars in the world in electric cars in the years to come.
And you don't know whether there is hydrogen car waiting outside, because when people met in Kyoto, nobody realized that shale gas will become reality so soon, but it became. And as you ask me, decarbonization, other terminologies,
like climate neutral, etc.
Climate neutral and other terms used, we have always said that keeping temperature rise below 2 degrees itself is an ambitious and comprehensive goal. So let us not complicate with newer words, but let us move towards it, because we, by just putting in words, we don't achieve them. What achieves is we must start believing in human intent and intelligence. It is the research happens for general welfare also. It is not that research is driven by market signals alone. Research, Louis Pasteur's, Archimedes, Galileo's and Newton's and everybody, and even internet founders, they did not invented it for some rights or something. They invented it for human welfare, and it happened. So things happen, and therefore we let us not get into bogged down into those vocabulary. Let us keep it simple to say ambitious goal of keeping below 2 degrees, and let us achieve it.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question. I think this again goes back to Paris and the nature of politics that plays up in these negotiations. Is Ariana asking, to what extent the BRICS countries support India in the Paris meet? Do you see any limitations to their support? And I'll use the advantage of being the anchor to tag another question to this, saying, how essential at these negotiations is it to have partner countries, and how essential is it at times to stand alone if required to protect certain national interests?
I don't think we will require to stand alone. We will take always people with us, and basic grouping last month only met in Beijing, and we had given a comprehensive joint statement. That is a stated position. As far as BRICS, we met 3 months ago in Moscow, and we had the same similar kind of statement emanating from it. We have also networked SAARC countries, other countries, small island developed countries also. Everybody is on board. We have engaged with more than 60 countries in this year, other than MEA's engagement and PMO's engagements. But even on my own ministry has engaged with more than 60 countries. So our effort is to ensure that more and more countries speak in one voice, and like-minded development group is one such important forum, and G77 plus China has also broad understanding.
Another question from Matthias Soderberg, who asks, how many decades do you foresee the COP21 agreement will last?
If people are saying, and we also expect that it should be durable, it's not just one cycle.
So, it's
of
not for 10 years.
I don't think so. But how much durable, ultimately, how we work it out. Kyoto was for 20 years. Here, nobody is putting up a limit, but we hope that this should be more durable.
So, if you're saying Kyoto lasted 2 phases and it fell apart towards the end.
It is not fell apart, it was designed from 2000 to 2020.
This you presume will last longer if it works out well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Another question from Siana, who says, Julia Gillard collected carbon tax from industries in Australia. Is there any plan to implement the same in India as well?
We are already doing, as we said, coal.
You refer to the coal cess.
Not only coal, even all our pricing mechanism and the government's decisions, if we analyze, the economists will realize that we are taxing carbon.
In fact, we are taxing carbon more than any other country in the world.
Could you elaborate on that?
Even with commodity prices falling significantly, India has been a responsible user of fossil fuel. We have not expanded our usage because it became cheaper. Whereas in the West, that consciousness of conserving energy has not been demonstrated anywhere. So you will often find that as the prices of fossil fuel becomes cheaper, the consumption tends to increase in the West, not so in India. When you compare it with the levels of economic growth of both sides of the
and this is that you're looking at purchasing power parity to compare across the board. Thank you. Next question from Mariam, which is, and sorry, I'm trying to rush through because there are a lot of questions that have come through and we already surpassed our time limits. The last question maybe that we can take is Mariam asking, what is your objective to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere with the climate system? When do you see climate system stabilizing? What are the efforts needed beyond Paris and at Paris for this?
I think Paris will give that roadmap to an extent, because there will be always midterm review of actions, and we have decided one unanimity that henceforth it will be progression, enhancement of action and not backsliding. So, once world decides that, and if we walk the talk, I think with proper review and proper working, proper programming, I think, because we must believe and trust each other. It's like world community, like as a family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So we must believe in each other, that all countries are responsible nations and they will work to the benefit of the mankind, and therefore the developed world has to take more action. The developing world will take sustainable path, growth path, so that they will emit less while growing.
Thank you so much, ministers, for being with us this evening. Good luck with Paris. Good luck. We hope we get a good result out of there, and hope we all work there in Paris, just the way you said, as a congenial family.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
India will be doing that. That I can assure.
Very good.